All right, in the interest of time, we'll get started. Go ahead and get started. I do have a couple things to talk about in general, so I want to give our speakers enough time to do their presentations. Appreciate everybody being here, and for those people that are online, thank you for attending the NCCCO Foundation's 10th Annual Industry Forum, both here in Charlotte and on Zoom. For those who don't know me, I'm TJ Cantwell, the Executive Director of the NCCCO Foundation. I've had the pleasure of working with the Foundation Board since the summer of 2022 to help lead this organization and advance our mission through education, research, and workforce development. I'll be your MC and your moderator for a couple of the panels today. So I appreciate you, all joining us here. And we have a large audience that's joining us online and folks in person today. So this requires a lot of complex juggling, both technically and with our schedule. So we have several awesome folks. You'll see some folks in the back that are helping us with our AV, as well as some CCO staff that's going to be helping with running some mics today for the question and answer portion of all of the sessions. So I ask for your patience. If anything goes wrong with the technology, glitches like Zoom yesterday that went down apparently for an hour nationwide. So hopefully that doesn't happen today. And we're going to do our best to keep things rolling along, even if we do have some glitches, but hopefully everything runs smoothly. I do have a few quick housekeeping items. Let me first point out for those who are here that please note your emergency exits. In case anything does happen, we need to evacuate. If you're here in person, please sign the sign-in sheet that is now going around if you haven't already done so. That way we can make sure we count for you being here. And then for those who are also attending here, you should have a copy of the agenda in front of you. There's a QR code on it to get the full session descriptions as well as the bios of our speakers. If you are online, you can simply use your phone and use the QR code on your screen. We encourage everybody to ask questions. We should hopefully have time for a couple questions at the end of each one of the presentations or panels. If you're online, you can also ask questions by putting them in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to try to get to those as well. We will not have a Q&A panel at the end of all the things. We will just, end of the day, we'll actually just have Q&A at the end of each one of the individual sessions to be able to accommodate time for our speakers. Also, after the forum, you'll receive an evaluation via email. Please ask that you provide your feedback so we can help to make sure we improve the program for the future. Finally, please be aware that the forum is being recorded. So registrants, all registrants, anybody's in attendance will also receive a link to the recordings within a couple of weeks. So let me start. It's my pleasure to welcome for the first time Mr. Andy Sterlen. He has extensive experience in occupational health and safety, specifically with the North Carolina Department of Labor and OSHA State Plan State. Andy Sterling has over 25 years of experience in industrial hygiene in the chemical industry. In his role as a health education specialist for North Carolina OSH, he instructs many widely varied topics from chemical hygiene and PSM to crane inspections and steel erection. He began his career as an R&D and process chemist in the field of polymer chemistry. After graduate school at NCSU in pulp and paper chemical engineering, he returned to the industry as a plant manager and led engineering, where he managed both process safety management and chemical hygiene plans. He has authored several published papers, holds 7 U.S. patents in polymer chemistry, and has the MESH certifications in general industry, construction, industrial hygiene, and environmental, as well as being a certified OSHA construction safety specialist. Please join me in welcoming Andy Sterling to talk about crane safety hazards and inspections. Thank you very much.
Let's see, great. And
You should be able to just click right through
wow, fancy.
right there.
Hey, that's pretty.
Your screen's right here.
Oh, look at that. All right. Something new for me. That's a rarity. All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Andy Sterling. I work with Department of Labor, specifically with OSHA. I work for in private industry for many years as a chemical engineer, building plants specifically. I worked in rheology, which was the study of flow. So building a lot of chemical plants, and I was a big-time hands-on engineer, did not like farming a lot of work out, so I was always there. You know, if it was plumbing work, I'm running pipe. If it was electrical work, I'm doing that. So one big thing, so much travel all over the world. When I finally, at some point in my 40s, was like, you know what, I've had enough of this. Decided to come to labor, and it's been great. I love working there. So I work with a lot of different folks, and some of the folks I work with, of course, you know, work with cranes. So we do a lot of work with commercial and residential construction. So we have cranes that span a wide variety. I also do a lot of work with arborists. In fact, last week, I was at ArborFest Expo, climbing trees, and we use cranes for that, not just for sectioning out pieces, but also for getting up into really tall trees. Because if you've ever done any arborist work, by the time you climb up, say 150, 160-foot cottonwood, you're pretty exhausted. And now you got to start setting up your lines and working your way down and cutting it and then going back up. So yeah, there's a lot to it. So cranes are fantastic. We do a ton of work with them, but what I'm here to talk to you about, because you guys understand cranes, I'm sure, I would hope, you're pretty familiar with a lot of the regulations. What I wanted to talk about, I'm just using this as a backdrop, is a lot of the things that we look for when we come and do an inspection, all right? So these are the things that can trip you up, so I'm sure most of you have some sort of inspection process in place. Cranes are very, very, very large pieces of capital investment, and so you have to be insured. And a lot of times when you take some shortcuts that we see, that can really affect if you get busted, OSHA is really going to be kind of the least of your worries. Your insurance company is going to have a lot to say, especially if there's a fatality or some sort of accident involved. So the first slide here is with amputations. The reason I've got this up here is because we see more accidents in this state with cranes when it comes to setting them up, whether it's mobile crane or a tower crane. The setup of the crane, that's where most people lose digits, and that's most of our accidents. It's very rare because, you know, most of our folks are really good, very stringent safety procedures, so it's rare we ever have a failure. Crane gets overloaded, tips over. That does happen occasionally, but more than anything else, losing digits while putting together sections of the jib or mounting a trolley, setting up a tower. It's another one where we see a lot. Again, these are large masses of metal, and when they come together and your thumb or your fingers in between the two, it just gets obliterated. You know, there's no sewing it back on. It's just squished like a bug. So that's the biggest, and that's why we started off with that. So when we look at equipment and equipment that's not covered, one thing that we see out in the field a lot is things like digger derricks. The nice thing about a digger derrick is that it can pick up a certain amount of weight. What do you think these are used out of context for more than anything else? Any ideas? You don't have to whisper, just speak right up. They're used for cranes, and they're used specifically, they're kind of short, they don't really have a lot of height. But where we see them and people get into trouble is they don't use them for their proposed use. If they are used for drilling holes and setting poles, you're good. Anything other than drilling holes and setting poles, now it's considered a crane and it falls under the crane standard. That means you better have a licensed operator and so on and so forth. When you've got houses that single-story ranch, you know, you just need to put some rafters up there. We see this happen a lot with these cranes, right? So Don't do that. Again, that's mostly chuck in a truck. It's not large cranes, but I'm just saying. Same thing with articulating knuckle booms. Again, these are for specific uses. You pick up a pallet, you sit it down at the job site. If it's a pallet of bricks, you dump half the bricks over, then you sit it down on the job site. But again, it's just transferring materials, and that's it. Anything you go above and beyond, you start lifting up rafters, wood. We've seen people get busted for lifting decking up into a structure using one of these. Don't do that. Having a competent person on site is absolutely essential. This is somebody that knows what the job is, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and they know the dangers involved with what's going on. But the biggest part of this is they have authorization to take prompt corrective measures. That is the big one, okay? Everybody on your job site should be a competent person. They should be able to say, whoa, 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 stop. But you'd be surprised how many times we drive up on a job site, there'll be a guy in an 8 or 10 foot hole or up on a building without fall protection. We're like, hey, you got to get that guy out of there now, or you got to get that guy off that building, or get him in some fall protection. And they're like, oh, hold on a second, let me call my boss. Is that a competent person? No, because they got to get permission from someone else. That's the person, when OSHA drives up on your job site, that's the guy they're going to want to talk to. Now, a qualified person, this would be somebody who designs the crane or recommends the crane, right? If you say, hey, we are setting up an HVAC unit on top of this building, we got to replace the old one, right? You don't need a tower crane for that. Just a mobile crane will work great. So they're going to look at the capacity and so on and recommend it. That should be your qualified person. They can have a degree, but they don't have to have a degree. They can have a lot of experience, but they have professional standing and extensive knowledge. That's really the thing we're looking at. We'll be able to tell, right? If we go, there's an accident, and we're like, okay, well, who was the qualified person that recommended that you do it this way or you use this crane? We go talk to them, and we're like, well, the orange one was rented out, and we had the blue one, so we said take the blue one. That is not a qualified person, all right? Somebody should be able to talk to us intelligently and tell us, okay, this is the reasons why we recommended this. Having a spotter, this is a huge one. A lot of times, how many people here have actually operated a crane? Okay, good, so most everybody. You know you cannot see what you are doing all the time, right? You're depending on talking with somebody on a two-way radio, or somebody that's signaling, but somebody knows what they're doing. And power lines are a real mess. This is where a lot of people get into trouble. I'd say after the amputations, putting things together, this would be number 2 on the list as far as injuries and fatalities go, and certainly losing cranes, because they will lose track of the power lines, they'll blend in with the horizon, because again, the perspective of the people on the ground is different from the perspective of the operator, especially if you're in a tower crane and you're way, way up high. We look at a tower from down below, we're like, oh wow, that guy should be able to see everything great. Yes and no. You can see everything great, but your perspective is very different. So it is like trying to use a pair of tweezers to pluck a hair, except the problem is that your arm is several hundred feet long and the hair is several hundred feet away, and you're trying to look and see if you can get it or not. That's where having a spotter comes in to help you. It's somebody that will really help. Now, not just with moving loads, but also with power lines. And again, second one, that's probably the second thing we see more than anything else. Adequate conditions are another huge one. In our state, if you don't like the weather, just wait 10, 15 minutes and it'll be totally different, right? Today we got a beautiful day. Last week it was raining most of the week. The week before that, we had unseasonably temperatures in the 90s up in the mountains when I was up there, working with arborists and stuff. The week before that, we were in Marion, further east, still in the mountains, and it got down the 20s at night. So you never know from week to week what you're going to get. A lot of rain is a really big issue on a lot of these job sites. Really good success on all these job sites come from a couple of things. One is making sure you've got good conditions, firm soil, drainage, crush and run, whatever you need there to keep it nice and flat and have a good area to lay all your materials out. The other one is making sure that you know what is in that area. Probably the number 3 thing that we see more than any other is not knowing where things like underground utilities are. Mobile crane comes up, especially in the city. A lot of city construction here in Charlotte, but not just in Charlotte. We also see it in Raleigh, in Winston-Salem, and even down at the beach in Wilmington and places like that. We see more and more commercial construction in urban areas that used to be more akin to Mayberry than New York City. You see what I'm saying? And with that, people don't know, oh, there's a utility vault there. Oh, Old Man Jenkins back in 23 dug a big hole there because they were going to set this vault, but they ended up not doing it, so they just covered it up with asphalt, and it's held ever since, but, we didn't know it was there. So they put their outriggers out, no cribbing, and that outrigger just goes bloop right through the asphalt when it comes under load. I would say that's the 3rd biggest issue that we see. So with assembly and disassembly, remember there's 2 big options. And when we come out there, if it's an amputation or an injury or an accident or a fatality, they're going to go soup to nuts and look at everything. And part of what they're going to ask you about is when you put this together and took it apart, what did you follow? Did you use a manufacturer's procedure, which is what you should use, but if you don't have that, then you need to write your own, and they need to be detailed, just like if you were trying to sell that crane and they say, well, I'll buy it, but you got to make a really good instruction manual. That's how detailed it's got to be, all right? Having that person that is supervising, that knows exactly what's going on, that is absolutely essential. They know the procedures, but not just the procedures, they also know the order, and they're not taking shortcuts, right? You can't just go, well, we got this section, so we'll put those 2 together, and then maybe put these 2 together, and then maybe the other sections will get here, and then just save time, we'll mount the trolley, and we'll do this. It's got to be just like it says in the manufacturer's thing. If you don't follow that, they'll gig you for that. Using cribbing, that is a huge one. And it's one that people get, I mentioned this already, but people get into trouble with this all the time. You cannot just dump all that load on that one little tiny foot. You've got to spread out. Again, probably most of you, I'm preaching to the choir, but chucking a truck that goes to White Owl Trading in Kinston and is like, well, look at there, man, I can get me a whole big old crane, that's some old military crane, I only have to pay $5,000. That's the guy that usually ends up causing a lot of issues. Yeah, you go and scratch away the white paint on the outside, the rattle can spray job, and you'll see olive green underneath every time. This is in downtown Raleigh. You can see, how does this setup look? I mean, what do you think? And there aren't any wrong answers, But I would tell you, I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad at all, Yeah, I mean, this was a real challenge because you can see the sidewalk up here. You can see how it slopes down. That's granite. All the curbs in Raleigh are all cut granite. So, I mean, they're great at tearing up your tires. But you can see the outriggers are down. They've got adequate cribbing. They've got cones around there. That street was blocked off. They did a really good job, and they had spotters there for all the electrical lines that were running across the way. No issues with this. We were fine with that. This site, again, they were doing a critical lift here. This building's long since built, and it's huge, but one of the big issues they have were all those transmission lines in the back. The perspective from this is that they're pretty far away, but actually on the job site, they weren't really as far away as they looked from the street. So again, having those spotters and making sure they identified where those power lines were and the work zones they were working in was essential. So this is the rule of thumb we use when we're talking about power lines, is if you can get within 20 feet of it. If the answer is yes, then you're going to have a series of things that you're going to need to do or keep in mind as you proceed. If the answer is no, then you just go for it, right? But the problem is when we get into that like 18, 19 foot range where people are like, yeah, we're close, but we're not that close. So now you start riding by the seat of your pants. Don't do that, right? So we have a minimum clearance distance. This is in the 1926 or the construction standard. I recommend to folks pay attention to this, because if you know what the nominal voltage is, then that will give you what your clearance is. And this is important because when the compliance officer comes there, they're going to be measuring stuff like this. They're going to get it all together. You need to prepare yourself. One thing I tell folks, which they don't realize, is that so where was I just before I came here? I was teaching an OTI course with OSHA in Chicago. North Carolina's a state planned state, but we do have the feds come in and they audit us from time to time, and we also teach with them and so on. So our compliance officers have to get trained. I train our compliance officers. I also train the general public and folks like you. So nobody gets a leg up on anybody. So I tell you all the same things I tell them. If they're in here and this was an internal class, I would tell them, look, you need to pay attention to this and make sure you calculate what the minimum distance is, because if they're breaking that, that's going to be another citation, right? Now, it's important for you to remember, when they write you a citation, don't just get pissed off and write a check and let it go at that. You need to go to your informal conference with the supervisor, right? They'll call you in, but one, it shows you're taking it seriously. Two, if you go in and you argue and you're prepared with a cogent argument, they'll reduce it. They almost always do. Because remember, we only have a handful of attorneys for the entire state. So it's to their benefit to settle with you before it goes to court. Now you can, if you got 7 charges, you can settle 7 out of the 8, or you got 8 charges, you can settle 7 out of the 8 and still take that 8th one. That's entirely up to you. It's your prerogative. But I encourage everybody, don't just sign a check. Go and talk to them, work it out, and that's going to really work to your benefit. All right? It'll save you money. Some companies, $1,000-$2,000 isn't that much. To most companies, $1,000-$2,000, I mean, that goes on your bottom line. That's money. Again, this is just going more into some of the things that you need to do if you are in that, if you're going to be working within that limitation zone. Going underneath power lines, there's a table in clearance table in table T. This is one, it's more embarrassing than anything else, to get caught up in underneath a bridge. This happens quite a bit in Durham. Anybody here from Durham? Work in Durham? No? Okay, we have a rail bridge in downtown Durham that is notorious. In fact, comedian Aussie Man did a whole big 30-minute video on all the crashes. And it says on there, plain as day, what the clearance is, 13 feet, 3 inches. And yet you will still have semis go right underneath it and just rip off the top of their truck. It happens at least 2 or 3 times, a quarter at least, and that's a lot. So again, you can see based on the voltage of the line going over you, if you're traveling, so everything's collapsed, you have a little bit more leeway. With utilities, again, if you got to kill them, you need to make sure that it's utility workers or somebody that's licensed working on them. Don't just go there and do it yourself, right? Again, we will have people doing renovations. Again, it's Chuck in a truck. He'll worry about the power lines. He'll go and try to pull the meter and get electrocuted, right? And so now not only is Chuck dead, but now his crane is set up there and stuck, and everybody goes home, and now the homeowner's like, what the hell am I going to do with this crane in the middle of my yard, because he's usually an independent contractor. Doing inspections, very, very important. Remember, there are some inspections that are monthly, that are done by a competent person. There are some that are visual inspections that are also done by a competent person. When you do these inspections, they don't all necessarily have to be documented, okay? Some do, some don't. If you look in 1412 A through C, it will tell you, but one thing I can tell you is this. If you document it, even if it's just like on an iPad or a notepad or something like that, or just on a piece of scrap paper, and you keep track of all of them, that is better than just saying, oh, yeah, we check it every day, Then he's going to ask Fred, do they check that every day? Well, I don't know, maybe. I kind of see him walking around it. Well, what are they talking about? I don't know. They're just walking around it. I don't know. Colored mud flaps, that green paint underneath the yellow paint. Yeah, I'm not sure, right? But the thing is that if you've got it documented that, yes, we did this inspection, we found this, we checked the headache ball, we did all this other stuff, now you've got evidence. So when they say, were you doing your inspections regularly? Yes, we were. And here, they don't have any place to stand, right? So again, you have to have documentation for these at a minimum. So your annual, every year, it should be a comprehensive. After you've assembled the crane, before you've started up, anytime you're doing a repair or an adjustment, if you modify the crane for some reason, let's say you have to make a repair or a modification on it, if it's been out of service for a long time, because sometimes a lot of these tower cranes get rented, sometimes they're sitting there because there's no projects to rent them out to. So if it's been sitting a while, it's not in regular use, you may need to check it out. Different types of inspections. Remember, your competent person, he's going to do your shift inspection every day. That's your daily one that you want to make sure. The competent person knows what they're doing. They can do that. They can also do the monthly. When we start getting into the more comprehensive ones, which is the annual inspection or a modification, repair, or after it's been assembled, that needs to be done by a qualified person. So some of the things on a daily basis we need to make sure work are, all the things you see here. But I can tell you the big one that the compliance officers are going to look for is boom stops, very important. Jib stops, also very important, right? Your brakes, they need to be working. The headache ball up top, that needs to work. Your crane level indicator needs to work. That's another really big one. And then the horn, some way of signaling that horn is really important. They're also going to look to see what your form of communication is with your riggers or your person that is helping you or your spotter, right? So that limiting device, once again, has got to work, and that is really important. So if it's not working, you can't start your job, right, until it's fixed. Now, if the crane is on site and it's being repaired, you're waiting for parts or something, obviously they're not going to bust you for that, because you should have it tagged out and say not in use, not in operation, until you get it fixed. So when it comes to fixing things, right, You need to get them done, and you need to get them done relatively quick. Got it. So Category 1, 7 calendar days. Category 2, which is, a little more involved, that's going to be a 30-day. Let's see, let's get that one. Your operator needs to make sure that they're not distracted while they're in the cab, right? We see, what are they called? The earbuds? Yeah, earbuds, headphones, that kind of thing. Those are distractions. Talking on the phone, playing video games on the phone. Phones can be a big distraction. Using the phone's two-way radio, that's fine. Make sure in your cranes that all of your protective devices, your ladders, your grab rails, things like that are all working. A lot of times when we go there, we hit the top 3. Below that, broken things on your crane are one that always attract attention, whether it's a mirror, a guardrail, a step, something like that. Make sure all those things are working. Make sure your folks have fall arrest equipment, especially when you are putting in sections in the crane. Obviously, staying clear of the load is really important. Not riding on the load on the way up, like, catching a ride on a big thing of decking, something like that. You don't want to do that either. Your rigging, it's important to make sure it's done by a qualified rigger. Some of the job sites we've worked on, they've gotten to the point where now guys will have numbers on their hard hats. They can put it in an iPad and see, okay, that guy's a qualified rigger, that guy's not, what is he doing there? And they'll pull him right off that. Whoops. With tower cranes, one of the big ones we get people all the time is in plumb tolerance, right? Make sure when you set it up, it's got to be set up correctly, and it's got to be plumb and level. If it's off just a wee bit at the base, that's going to translate to being off a lot up top, and that is going to throw off all of your weights and all of your perspectives. Making sure that your operators are qualified, meaning they've got their test. They're enforcing this now. The can got kicked down the road for many years, but not anymore. And there are a lot of accredited testing organizations that you can use, but just like always, a military license, government license, audited employer, those are not portable licenses. So if somebody was a licensed person for another entity, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can be for you. If they was a third-party testing organization, then yes. You don't have to have a qualification for 2,000 pounds or less. That's why with digger derricks and with knuckle boom cranes, we can get away with that for just offloading certain things because of the weight. The certification has to be given, at no cost to the operator, right? So you have to provide qualification or certification. There are a lot of different tests. The biggest thing is making sure they know what they're doing. We got a lot of crane operators that fly by the seat of their pants. They really need to have a good idea of what those load charts mean and how to calculate loads, rather than just be like, well, she feels a little light in the back, so we might need to add a little weight. Again, don't get caught in that situation. Again, with your signalers, all types of signals, you can use hand, voice, audible, whatever. It just has to mean something between you as the signaler and you as the operator. You two need to be in sync. Of course, you've seen the hand signals. Again, with your rigger, your signal person, they need qualification as well. That's usually a pretty short training. Making sure with your training requirements that you're taking care of all these things. Look out for overhead power lines. Make sure you got your signal person trained. Make sure your operators are licensed. Make sure you know who your qualified and competent people are and that they're doing their jobs. Really watch out for crush and pinch points because, again, number one injury with cranes is setting them up and making sure if you've got something that is broken that it is tagged out. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, do you some time for some questions? Yeah, anybody have any questions? Really? Nobody? Okay, fire away. Hooray. Oh, you get a microphone. This is like the Mike Douglas show. Oh,
right.
maybe some of you know what the Mike Douglas show is.
So
Okay.
can you provide any comments on the difference between, say, general industry and construction and how that affects
Absolutely.
your inspection?
So that's a great question. So when the crane standard was written, it was written in the construction standard. However, we do use cranes a lot for general industry. In fact, that's a great point. I mentioned HVAC units. That is one that, that's a bread and butter job for a lot of our crane operators out there. And with something like that, that is considered general industry practice. However, you having the crane out there and using the crane, that gets cited under construction. The dudes that are actually doing the installation, they're going to be under the 1910 or general industry standard as opposed to construction standard. If it was new construction, then they'd fall under 1926. Good question. Anyone else? All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.